Hello, and welcome in. If you were listening during that starting soon screen, I apologize. I put on some music and went to go close the windows and stuff, and I had a loop of audio, so I came back and it was just screeching, and I'm sorry. But you know what? We should have some background music now, which is kind of cool. We are gonna keep working on Elixir Emporium this week. I will go ahead and start by introducing myself to anybody that's new. My name is Andrew. I do game development every Tuesday at this time, 1 p.m. in Pacific time. And I'm one of the two co-founders of Chroma Golem, a game studio that focuses on more of the technical side of using some new AI technologies to enable some new features in games that we haven't really seen possible before. So we built a lot of prototypes over the last couple months. We've been streaming a lot of them on stream, but also building some on our own just to see like what's fun, what's not. There's a lot of really cool stuff that AI can do, and I hope you'll see some of that in this demo, which is kind of a culmination of what we've learned in other demos so far. Yeah, I mean, I can probably talk for hours about all the cool stuff it can do, but let's go ahead and I will jump on over to a code scene. And you know, let me start by saying we had a good systems demo it's been a couple weeks now at least. We built basically the game that we're going to be working on. We built it in menu form originally just to test out like how fun is it, how do things work, build a lot of the systems for the AI. And you can actually play that for free if you go to chromagolem.itch.io. It's our most recent demo, Elixir Emporium here. We've also got some other ones that are really cool. If you're interested in those, hit me up in the chat and I'll explain them, but you can also explore them yourself. In Elixir Emporium, you basically play as an alchemist who has the ability to combine items into new items. So we've kind of seen that before in games where like Little Alchemy and some basic crafting systems in other games where you combine a stick and a stone and you get a shovel, or you combine a bucket and water, you get a bucket of water. Those are pretty obvious combinations of items, and we have a lot of those hard-coded in so you can get started. But we also hooked up the crafting system to an AI in our engine. So if you come across any two items that the game doesn't have a crafting recipe for, but you as a player think like, oh, I want to combine these two items, you can do that. And we basically ask that AI under the hood like, okay, the player has this item and this item, they're combining them, here's some other game state stuff that might affect what they get. What do they get? And then we save that recipe in the game. So if you were to combine moss and an empty bottle, you can see we're doing some generation behind the scenes, and I hope things work. We get a bottle of moss infusion. Let me full screen this. And so then, from then on, the whole time you're playing the game, if you combine a empty bottle and moss, you always get this item. So you start out with a lot of randomness, but you kind of remove that randomness as you play and as you learn about the systems. So it's kind of a new experience every time that you can also build skill on. So if we also took like a crystal and an axe, you can also see that each item has some value. So there's probably some strategies like our moss and our bottle were each 1 gold, and the resulting item is 3 gold. So if you needed a lot of gold in the game, maybe now that you know this recipe, you go collect a bunch of glass, which you turn into bottles, and then you also collect a bunch of moss, and then you combine all those and sell these off to the shops. But let's also combine an axe and a crystal just to see what we get. I kind of like just exploring and combining random stuff, we get a crystal axe. And you'll see these also have stats on them. Obviously, these stats aren't doing much in a game where you have no player, and you're not interacting with things in the world. But what you'll see is we also have a randomly generated location that you're in, which includes randomly generated NPCs, which each have their own profession and also personality. And if you were to click on one, say Reginald the Herald, we also ask an AI under the hood. We say, all right, here's your NPC, here's his profession, here's some information about him in the world, the location he's at and stuff. Generate a problem or a quest that NPC might have, and then generate some dialogue to go around it so they can explain it to the player. So Reginald is the herald of the town. His duty is to communicate news and announcements, but the extreme heat caused by the surrounding volcanoes has made it nearly impossible to preserve important documents. The ink fades, the parchment crumbles too swiftly. He can't lose stuff like that because it's his job. He's in dire need of an item that could help preserve these documents or provide a more durable alternative to paper that withstands the heat. So he has given us an open-ended problem. He's not asking for a specific item that we have. It's more of an open-ended puzzle. So we are tasked with figuring out something that might help him. So in this sort of systems demo, we handled foraging throughout the world, which is another menu, obviously. So if you were to play the game in its final state, you'd be able to go out and collect all this stuff around the world and a lot of other stuff as well. But we're going to go ahead and just collect a bunch of stuff here. Anything that might be relevant. So maybe he needs something that he could store his documents in, a different type of paper that might last longer, something that might restore his paper or something like that. Hey Tony, thanks for coming on in. No worries, we're just getting started. We're gonna go ahead and make him let's make some mud and a leaf, see what we get. And let's put the healing mud pack in an unfinished potion, put it more in potion form. So we got an earthen rejuvenation elixir. Seems pretty good. And here's where we start using the stats, because once you have an item and you give it to an NPC, we're turning back to that AI under the hood, and we are saying, here's the item details, here's the problem, here's the NPC, here's the location details, here's all this, including here's the attributes on the item. And then we ask that AI, does this item solve this problem? And we get back a yes or a no. Here we got a no, so he's going to give us some dialogue saying thank you, but it doesn't really help for my problem, and so on. That's kind of the core loop there. This was the systems demo we built that was really fun to play. And now we are making it 3D. So I'm in a kind of a debug scene here. We also have a much prettier we have a much prettier world scene. Let me show that off real fast. Play area. So in this world, you have your inventory system. Same sort of inventory system we had before, but now you can stack items, you can move items around. Crafting is a little bit different in that you drag stuff into slots and you'll be able to preview, if you already know this recipe, you'll be able to see what you're getting. It's kind of the same system, but just a different face on it. So you can combine multiple items and so on. You also have these hot bars, so you can take your axe and maybe your hammer, and you can actually run around in this world and interact with objects. So what we had, that system or that window where you just kind of drag dirt and air and branches and stuff over. Now we have a proper system where we have our axe selected. If we click on a maple tree, we're going to get back maple logs. That's not hard-coded into the game. That's us asking the AI, like, what do you use when you use an axe on a maple tree? Now we get maple logs when we use an axe. What do we use when we get a hammer? It's going to compute that as well. It's going to save all these recipes. We got cracked maple logs, because obviously that's not the best way to collect logs. If we were to use a saw, maybe we'd get something slightly different. What do we get here? Maple planks. So you can kind of see how you immediately have just an overwhelming amount of items that you can work with. And we're going to scope that down a little bit for like progression curve purposes of like, you're not going to start with all these tools, obviously. You're going to start with maybe, if you have no tools and you have nothing here, you use your fists on a tree. So what do you get here? You probably get like bruised knuckles. Okay, you get maple leaves. So you're going to collect a bunch of maple leaves out in the world. You might combine those into other stuff. Maybe you get some maple leaves here and you get some stone or pebbles or just other stuff that you might be able to combine and make more expensive items. So you can sell those and buy the tool that you want and have that sort of loop there of now you've bought one tool. You can go around to all these different entities and see what you get when you use that tool on a maple tree or a pine tree or water or stones or bushes or whatever. And you use that to then get enough money to buy another tool and so on. In this world, we also have the same NPC system where we've got Chad Soot the blacksmith here, which we're getting some error because I haven't been in the scene in a while, but I'll show you around in the next scene. But yeah, that's basically the gist. We're also going to have a recipe viewer so you can browse through all the recipes you've learned. And if you talk to Chad Soot and he's like, man, I really need something that keeps my hands from burning when I'm touching fire, it's like, all right, I'm going to look through all the stuff that I've learned. Here's how to make gloves. So I'm going to go collect the items that I need to make gloves. I'm going to make gloves and I'm going to give them to him. Or if I want to go above and beyond, maybe I'll make gloves and then like find a way to enchant them with something. We've got some cool trees, like a chaos tree, and we're adding more things you can interact with that can give you more options for trying to get the specific item that you want. But that's kind of the world that we're playing with, but we're working in a more debug scene right now just so we can kind of close some of the loops that we're working with. We have this core loop where you basically start in, you don't have any items, you talk to an NPC, you get some quests. We're going to have a lot of NPCs in town, so you can pick and choose who you want to help based on like your ideas of what they might need or what you can and can't create. Here's our debug scene. Obviously it's not going to feel as much like a final game. We've got everything just lined out so we can interact with stuff. We're also very, very fast and other stuff, but we've got Chad Soot the blacksmith over here. If we talk to him, he gives us a little introduction to himself. He also explains a problem that he's having. So, Chad Soot here, wielder of hammer and anvil. If it's honesty you seek in steel or word, you've come to the right forge. So also in this scene, we're incorporating his personality a lot better into the prompt. We'll probably look at those prompts a little bit later. He says, ever since I started working at the forge at Ironheart, all of my creations have been coming out as delicate glass instead of sturdy iron. Imagine trying to shoe a horse with glass horseshoes. I'm at my wit's end here. So we are pretty limited in the objects that we have available to interact with in the scene. I've been focused more on building the systems and not as much of like adding in the content. But we have a system that lets us add in any item we want, and then you can use any tool you want on it. So Obviously we want to add in like iron ore and like coal and like all the mineable stuff that I think might be helpful here. Maybe we want to make him an anvil or some sort of magic potion or something. So obviously that falls more into like adding more content to interact with. But let's see, what was this problem again? Comes out as delicate glass. Maybe let's just let's get an arboreal tentacle. Get some weird stuff going on. Maybe get a couple of those. Let's go look at some of these more like magical herbs that we set up. So we've got blush bloom flowers, mind petal, solar blossom. Maybe that might be useful. Let's grab some of that. We've got lavendream, zephyr leaf. Grab some of that as well, I guess. And then maybe let's get some stone for him. And then we'll combine some stuff and just see what we get. So we're getting moss off the mossy stone. Let's just get moss, or just get stone. Small rock. Maybe we go over to like a boulder. Maybe we can get a bigger rock here. Rough stone. Alright, and then let's also... what do we get in a treasure chest? It's going to be different every time. We got a locked treasure chest. Alright. So what if we actually... let's grab our hammer. Maybe use a hammer on the treasure chest. Cracked open treasure chest. Still got to work some on our prompts a little bit, I think. But what we can do is let's head back over to Chad. And one of the cool things that we added in this version is you can now talk back to the NPC. So we will... let's craft some items first, but we'll be able to ask like, hey, do you think this will help? Instead of just giving him an item and being like, I think this will help, and then he says, this doesn't really solve my problem. You can actually like talk back and forth with the NPC a little bit more. So it's a little bit more immersive. Also, as a side note, I have my window open because it's a nice day out, but if you guys start hearing anybody leaf blowing or mowing their lawn or anything, please let me know and I'll close it. But let's go ahead. All of his creations come out as delicate glass instead of sturdy iron. So maybe some solar blossom petals. We want to go for like hotness. Like we want to see what we get. Maybe a crucible and some solar blossom petals. Shimmering prism. Provides a soft light in dark areas. Not quite what we want. Maybe we stick that in the crucible. See what we get there. Luminous shield. Not quite. Maybe we do solar blossom petals and a hammer, actually. Maybe we can give him a like different kind of hammer. So that will... a sun-forged hammer. Alright, so that sounds pretty good. So we can say like, I have a sun-forged hammer specifically for that problem. And we'll see what he says. We still need to build in a lot of the like loading animations and stuff. But it's a very unpolished state while we get everything working. A sun-forged hammer, you say? That could be the key to fixing this blasted curse. Never thought I'd see the day I'd need magic to do proper smithing, but let me see it. If this is some trick or worthless trinket, you'll be eating your meals through a tube for a fortnight. Wow, okay. Let's go ahead and give him a sun-forged hammer, which we do by just dragging it into his window now. So we're asking the AI on back end, does this help? We get a little system message while we're in debug mode here of like the player gave Chad Slit their sun-forged hammer, solved the problem, the item solved the problem, yada yada yada. He says, oh, by the ancients, the sun-forged hammer, its gleam alone speaks of its incredible power. To think that the light of a solar blossom now resides within my grasp, promising to fix my blundering glassworks back into proud iron. Nothing short of miraculous. I can already picture the sturdy horseshoes I'll forge, all thanks to you. So he's incorporating the chat history again into his dialogue. Mention horseshoes up here. And yeah, so we were able to help him. We don't have it set up, but when you help an NPC, they will give you some gold as a reward, and they'll also tip you some items out of their inventory of just like, hey, thanks for helping me out. I don't have much, but here, take some gold and these items. And that'll be a good way for you to get some new items that maybe you won't be able to find in the world. And they're also themed a little bit around, like, a blacksmith is going to have metals and ores and tools and stuff. So if you want that stuff, you can go help a blacksmith, and maybe somebody else needs a new sword or something. Maybe like a knight passing through needs a sword, so you go help a blacksmith to get some ore, and then you can craft a sword or something like that. So we'll have a little bit more of a like chain that you can choose who to help and when. But we're gonna be working in this window a lot today, I'll say. One thing that I want to add is some canned responses, so you don't have to type messages every single time. I think what we learned in our very, very first demo is that players really appreciate just being able to click on a response and keep the conversation going unless they have something specific they want to say. So we'll add those canned responses. We're also going to take these conversations, so every time you talk to an NPC, it's a new conversation. So that starts with this message and ends with whatever message it ends with when you close the window. Whenever you close the window, we're going to summarize that whole conversation into one message, and then that message will be more of a like summary that appears at the top of the window the next time you talk to that NPC, so it'll keep a little bit of context. So here it might summarize to like, Chad was having problems forging iron because everything turned out to be glass. The player gave them a sun-forged hammer and it solved the problem, and Chad was thankful. So next time you go and talk to Chad, you'll have that as more of a reminder at the top of your conversation. And then he'll have a new message of like, yeah, this sun-forged hammer really burns my hands when I use it because it gets so hot. So then the player is implicitly prompted with like, all right, I'm going to go make him some gloves or something. And then that conversation gets summarized down into a single message saying, the player had previously given him a sun-forged hammer for this. He was now having this problem. The player gave him this, blah, 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 blah. So then the next time you open the conversation, it's got that summary, he's got a new problem, and so on. And all this time you're going to be building like relationship scores with him, and that'll feed more into other stuff in the game, but we're really focused on getting this core loop of you talk to an NPC, they tell you a problem, you find an item that solves that problem, you give them that item. So obviously this is a huge open world, less so in this scene, but I think when we get that loop nailed down, it's going to feel really, really fun to kind of talk to some people in town, see what all their problems are, go out into the world, collect a bunch of stuff, and then come back and help people. And we'll talk more about that cycle later, but that's a loop we're working on. We're going to go ahead and get started on... excuse me. We're going to go ahead and get started on those canned responses. So, what we've got is I mocked up what the UI might look like a little bit. Let me open up our UI window canvas. We've got our NPC window. And this is very, very temporary stuff, but stay with me here. In our player response container, I added in this sort of placeholder for summarized responses. So we don't want to actually say like the verbatim things that you will say. When you click on one of these, we want to just have more high level, do this, and then we'll generate the dialogue on behalf of the player. But I kind of modeled this over the UI in Disco Elysium, which I haven't played but looks really cool. Their UI is a very pretty game, so you'll kind of see some similarities there. But we're going to build in this. So what we've got is we're going to want this actually appended to the conversation. Let me just open this up and we'll talk it through. So at the end of every conversation state, we're going to append this sort of message saying, here's the conversation as is, generate 3 paths that the player could go down, 3 like types of messages they could send, and we will append each of those to the end of this conversation. So obviously like when it scrolls, it's going to be at the end instead of just down here. We'll set up click events for each of these. So if you click on ask to see his wares, or later on if you press 1 or whatever, then we will go ahead and use the AI again to say like, here's the conversation, here's the intent of what the player wants to talk about next, generate a message. We'll add that message, which will automatically kick off a response from the NPC as if the player had typed it. So the NPC will respond to that message, and then we'll get 3 new things on behalf of the player for him to talk about. So you as a player are kind of just guiding the conversation between these AIs on your behalf. So let's go ahead and just kind of start with some prompts, and we'll hook it all up. So I think what we'll want, I just have a placeholder prompt here for suggest canned responses to conversation. So we're going to model that after respond to conversation as NPC. So we've got our system and user prompt like most AI things. We've got a method for serializing our whole conversation history so we can pass it into the prompt. So let's go ahead and just take all of that. Let's do this so we can have them side by side. So I'll just type that up, and I'll be back to talking afterwards. Alright, so we got a bit of a prompt here. We're gonna go ahead and plug in a example user prompt. Just an example conversation. We'll generate a response and kind of see what we get, see if we need to tweak it at all. So we're gonna just copy this same input. We'll change around the values a little bit. So now we've got Alice, the apothecary. We'll throw in a quick conversation and say, Alice, hey there, need any potions? Player, yeah, I'm trying to hypnotize this guy at the tavern who's been real rude. And Alice says, oh, I don't know if I can help with that sort of potion. Alright, we'll generate a response to that, and let's see, does this prompt work well for what we're looking for? Getting this sort of canned responses for the player. So things that player could click on at this point are ask if Alice knows someone who might sell such potions, inquire if there are any alternatives to potions for dealing with rude people, question whether Alice has any non-magical solutions that could help with the situation. I don't really like those because they don't really lead to an action. Like they aren't really helpful to the player. So we're going to tweak the prompt a little bit and say the player is trying to accomplish a goal and may be very persuasive, which the NPC should be amenable to. So if we add that tiny little line and we generate a new response, we can say, inquire if there's a less potent potion that might make someone more suggestive or talkable. Suggest paying extra for her trouble and secrecy. That's a good one. Ask for any potion that might make the task easier, even if it's not specifically for hypnotism. So that's a lot better. Like, hey Josh, welcome in. We're working on a fun AI crafting game. We just moved it to a 3D world, and we are closing this tight loop that we're building, kind of the core game loop of you talk to an NPC, they explain a problem that they're having, and then you set off into the world to collect a bunch of items and craft an item that helps their problem, and you can give it back to them. So we're working on some of the conversation features. Right now, specifically, you can talk back to the NPC and ask some questions about their problem or talk about whatever you want. And we're just kind of generating some canned responses that the player can click on instead of having to type something every time. But welcome in. Thanks. How are you doing? We're gonna generate one more response. I liked these responses. Let's make sure it's consistent. So ask Alice if she knows anyone who might be skilled in that kind of potion making. Inquire if she has any potions that might make someone more suggestible or open to persuasion. Okay, so it's kind of the same. It's nice and consistent. We're not going to be generating the same sort of state multiple times, so it's okay that we get the same thing multiple times, because once you click on one of those, it's going to progress the conversation. So maybe if we were to click on offer to pay extra, I'd be happy to pay extra for your troubles. It's very important. So now Alice says, well, maybe if you bring me a death blossom flower, we could figure something out. So now the player's clicked on offer to pay extra. We've already generated the NPC's response to that. We now have a new conversation state. We're generating canned responses from the player at this point. Now you would ask where you might find a death blossom flower, inquire about the properties and effects, or offer to bring back extra death blossom flowers for a discount on future purposes. So obviously there's a lot of like game state we need to incorporate here. We're working on more of like a world Bible that these NPCs can query for details about like where is this flower found, who in town knows about X, Y, and Z, and so on. But I like this. We'll probably tweak it a little bit more later, but this is a good starting point. Sounds awesome. I've just been going down a Vulkan rabbit hole in my free time and making no tangible progress on anything. I know how that is. Vulkan is the all I know, it's like a rendering engine feature, right? It's for shaders. Is that right? I'm not very familiar with them, but I know it's pretty low level stuff that I haven't really messed with that much. But it sounds pretty rough to make some progress in. Can't be making progress all the time. Successor to OpenGL, graphics programming. Yeah, that sounds pretty rough. I imagine it's very heavy in the math, which I'm not so hot in. But, I mean, shaders themselves are a little too much for me as it is. Luckily, we got Tony Sprocket in the chat here who loves math, and so if you hit him with math problems, I'm sure he would love to help out, but we'll see. But this prompt is looking pretty good. So let's suggest canned responses to conversation. Let's stick that on the conversation database. That's a prefab we can grab. Where is our editor? Here it is. Let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. Conversation database, and we've got public prompt generate canned responses to conversation. Cool. We'll drag that in so then we can use it in our NPC window controller. And then we'll come back to the tokens that we'll use to insert it in, but it's all with this NPC window controller, or manager, I guess. Let's do this. Cool. So when we get a response from the NPC to the current conversation, let me make this a little clearer. Got NPC response. Here's where we're going to also kick off generating canned responses from the player. So we will go ahead and say prompt filled out prompt is equal to generate canned responses. Yeah, that looks correct. So now we're going to go ahead and add in these tokens so we can substitute stuff in. So we've got NPC name, NPC profession, which we have here. We've got, let's add in the personality as well. That's probably a nice one to have for just making these NPCs feel pretty flavorful. And then we have this conversation history, which just takes a serialized log. And it looks like we're using assistant and system instead of the actual names, like Alice and player. So we'll want to adjust that a little bit. Because the conversation itself doesn't have any concept of like the NPC's details. It's just literally a representation of OpenAI's conversation system. So what we want to do, let's just test this real fast. Let's take these back in And let's say assistant user assistant, and we will also let the AI know assistant so we got a little bit of references here. So now if we were to take these in, let's just make sure that like the output still looks good, that it's from the right point of view, stuff like that. So we get basically the same thing. This is great. Let's take these two off. We want canned responses from the player's point of view. Ask if she has any potions. Yeah. So that's great. We don't need to incorporate the actual names here. Just wanted to make sure of that. So we can go ahead and add those tokens back in. We've got NPC name, NPC profession, and personality, NPC personality. We don't need to test that, but let's add it into the example real fast. Bob is a what is the word there? No. Bob don't take nothing from no one. That's good enough. He loves his metal and ain't got time for magic. Cool, so we use that specifically because he doesn't usually work with magic and so on. So we're just kind of incorporating that backwards. Here, let's just add in serialized conversation, I think is what we called the token. Let's double check that. Oh, conversation history. That's fine. Cool, so now we should get a prompt. This prompt here, we fill in these tokens, and we will get back a response like this, which we can create another function that receives that response. So let's say public void or private void on generated canned responses for player, string canned responses, and so that'll get called. This text here becomes the parameter. Let's go ahead and call that with start coroutine filled out prompt dot generation coroutine. Looks good. So that's just the syntax we've built for our prompt system. Each prompt has a generation coroutine generator. We pass that in to start coroutine. It takes a delegate for what function to call when we have it completed that generation. So here what we want to do is we're going to basically, how do we want to structure our prefabs here? We've got it all in one text component right now, but I don't think we actually want that because we want to set up different click events for each line. So I think what we'll end up doing, let's kind of mock up how to look in the hierarchy here. So if we take this guy, bring him up to here, let's disable that, we're not using it. I also want to have this little like header just because it makes things a little clearer, but if we were to take this guy, not that guy, and split it into individual messages like this, we'd be able to set up click events on each of these, I believe. And we could also just have a separate prefab for like a header, I guess, that we don't set events on. Are coroutines like async stuff in Unity? Yeah, it's basically, it runs on the same thread, I think. So it's, I guess I don't really know how like JavaScript async stuff works. I think it's all in different threads. But basically, a coroutine will run in the background whenever you have a little bit of extra processing time, and then when it's done, it just like nothing happens. So what we've set up is basically just like a callback system. So when it's done, it'll call that function. But a lot of times, for example, if you were to animate this window going from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen by like changing its position every frame, that would work if you updated the position every frame. But if you had like a loop of logic of like, let me just write it here, like I don't need to write it in. If you had a I is less than like 1,000 pixels to move, and you did like transform position .x plus equal to 1 or something, this would move it from the left to the right. But you couldn't put that in the actual Unity main thread because it would block everything else from happening. So yeah, it's kind of like you can set a function effectively to run in the background in a separate thread. And it doesn't block other stuff. It yields back to the main thread whenever the main thread needs it. So yeah, it's basically like async to summarize. So what we want to do here is what has just happened? Oh, the Ninja. Thank you for following. You come for the code, stay for the cat. Yeah, we got Best Cat in here somewhere. Usually Lucy's back there. It's the only way people ever see her. But Dimitri makes himself very known any chance he can. I'm sure they'll both be back. This is the only window in the house open right now, and they both love that, so I'm luring them in. Also, thanks for coming in. We are working on an RPG crafting game. I'll show it off in just a minute, but where the gist is you can combine items using AI to make other items. You can also use any item on an object in the world. Almost like RuneScape style of like use an axe on a tree, you get logs. But now you can use a hammer on a tree and get like broken logs, or a saw on a tree and get planks. And all that is, there's some of it that's hard-coded in the game for like recipes of what happens when you use X on Y, but the rest of it is all AI generated, so you can use a bucket on a tree and it gives syrup, stuff like that. But we're working on this conversation for talking to NPCs. We are generating canned responses for the player to just be able to click on something and keep the conversation going. And we've just set up a prompt here somewhere that summarizes our current conversation and asks like what are some messages the player could say next, and we are just building that into the UI now by using these guys. So let's say canned player response suggestion. We're going to need to unpack this prefab, make it a new prefab, since it was just like a text message and we want to treat it a little differently. Let's put that guy in. So now we can go ahead and split our canned responses. Since we get them on new lines, we can say string canned responses by line. I think that'll work. Sometimes with Windows you also get the return symbol, but we'll see. So now we can just say for each of those. We are going to need a prefab for that, or a reference to the prefab we just created. So we'll go ahead and say that'll live in the NPC window. Say public game object ref canned response summary. So we'll create one of those for each generated canned response. I guess, yeah, it's probably a good idea to trim it and make sure it's not empty. But we can go ahead and say game object canned suggestion is equal to instantiate one of those at our current, well, actually, where do we want to stick it? We want to stick it in the conversation container, which is this guy, I believe. Let me double check. Content, yeah. So we want to put that parented into that transform just because that's what handles the layout of the conversation. So we're adding stuff to it so it'll naturally place it. And then we want to set the text of it. So we will just get the text mesh pro UGI component and set that. We also want to set up a click event for this. We'll do that in a second because I also want to create a little header for the U message. So we'll do that up here. And we'll say if canned responses by line.count dot size. Can you get the size of an array in C#? I don't even remember. So if we have at least one, then we will go ahead and create a kind of just the same thing, and we won't set up a click event for that. We're just going to set the text to, let's call it header. And the forever thing that I'm always doing, we Google m dash, we copy an m dash. One day I'll learn how to make a real one with just my keyboard. Alright, so that'll set up our header, and then for each of our canned responses, which should be 3, but sometimes the LLM might make 1 or 2 or more. So we'll get a new line for each of those. Let's go ahead and set up a onClicked canned response method. And I don't know what parameters it's going to need yet to be a click event, so let's just do this. I don't know how we would get the text. Let's say get the text for this clicked text mesh pro button. What are you doing here? That's not good. Let's say, let's get rid of that, and can we generate something else here? Oh, I guess we can actually just pass in the canned response, and then we'll say, like, I don't know if this will actually work. Let me just button click event parameters. Right. Unity. think that's what we want. So what we will do is add a listener that does an anonymous delegate that calls on clicked canned response suggestion for canned response. And then we can generate that real fast. And so now when we click on the button component, which we still need to add for these prefabs, it will create this function in memory real fast and call it, why does this, oh. And then, so it'll call it with this canned response, hopefully. And so we will get the canned response here, which lets us just kind of ignore what button was pressed and so on, but we can go ahead and just generate a actual dialogue from the player for that canned response and add it to the NPC dialogue. So very, very around the bush basically, but I think it'll work. It'll just be a little slow sometimes, so let's just see how slow. But we are gonna need one more prompt actually. And we will say, we'll call that respond to conversation as player. We will type this real fast. We'll set it up and then test it. So you're in charge of generating a single dialogue message from the user for a given conversation state. You will be given a guiding direction for what the dialogue from the player should accomplish, and you should incorporate the player's previous style and tone into your message. Cool, that's fine. So if we say conversation history, and we'll do like, Bob, hi, I'm a blacksmith, and let's actually make that assistant because that's how we serialize the conversation. User, I hate blacksmiths. Do you know any Fletchers? Nope, get out of here. So there's our conversation history. We're generating canned responses for the player to respond. So the player is user here. Our guiding direction will be apologize and ask to see their wares. So if we have this sort of prompt, I think we need to prompt it a little bit better for what format we want, but sorry for coming off strong earlier. I didn't mean any offense. Alright, so it's a little verbose. Let's go ahead and say, please only write 1 to 2 sentences and be succinct. Don't use any quotation marks, speaker tags, or other formatting. Just output the dialogue line said by user. Alright, so that, I mean, hopefully we just get a shorter message. Okay, I'm sorry for my rudeness earlier. Could I maybe see what you have for sale? Perfect. If we say, I love blacksmiths, do you like anvils? Yes, I have one right here. I guess they don't need to apologize here, but let's say they did. Sorry for getting sidetracked. Can I look at what you got for sale? Great. Guiding direction. Ask to touch their anvil. Should I touch your anvil? I've always been fascinated by them. Alright, so it works pretty well. So the flow we have is you got the conversation. We will generate these canned responses. Player clicks on one. They're very summarized and short, and then we generate the full dialogue to add that to the conversation. And this prompt intentionally is like as short as I'm comfortable making it instead of giving a lot of examples because we want this to be relatively fast. But we can also mask some of the slowness with like animations and stuff. So what we want to do here is, let's say, let's add another prompt reference up here. So public prompt generate full message from canned response suggestion. Quite the name, but we'll use that here. We fill it in with our tokens. And we only need, let's see, what do we call it up here? Conversation history. And we'll say guiding direction. So we have those tokens. We just did a simple replacement here of guiding direction. So we can throw in canned response here because that is the text that was clicked on, and we can say conversation history is conversation. Ooh, do we have a reference? Oh, okay, we just need to get the conversation. And I think this is just like a, yeah, it's O of 1 looking into a map, so we don't need to worry about calling that all the time. Conversation.serialized formatted log. And that'll condense it all into that format that we had from our data structure. Cool. So we will need another function for on-generated canned response dialogue. We'll call it dialogue from player. So that's what we're going to call when this prompt is done generating. And that is where we will add it to the dialogue, add it to the conversation, and then call the same thing that we would call if the player submitted their own response. On player input submitted is how we handle that. So I think we can just reuse this function. It'll clear the dialog box, which I think is good. Adds it to the conversation history, redraws the conversation history, and then prompts the NPC to respond to that. So we can actually just, we don't even need the extra function. We can call onPlayerInputSubmitted with our generated text. So let's do that. So when this prompt finishes generating, it'll have some text, and we just pass it into the output from as if it were from the text box. Cool. So in order for this all to work, all we need to do now is add a button component to our canned player response suggestion prefab. And doesn't need customized or anything. Should just work as long as we have this component on it, because we're adding the on-click events from the code. Cool, so it's all going to be very slow, I think, at the start. But we can go ahead and try it. I'm sure there will be errors that we'll need to fix. For example, we didn't even set these references. Let's see, we need generate canned responses and generate full message. Let's say, actually, we'll call this generate message from canned suggestion. And then let's go ahead and test it out, I guess. Let's close our NPC window so it initializes correctly in the game. And let's open up a console so we can at least see our beautiful errors when we get them. But Chad Soot, what do you got here? Actually, we should have... I'm not sure if we should... Where did we even start? With our canned responses. I don't know if it'll trigger off the first messages. Let's just trace back through real fast. On generated canned responses, got NPC response to current conversation. So we never actually call this until the player has said something. We actually want to generate some canned responses, but let's go ahead and say, sorry, I'm deaf. Can you write that down instead? So that's going to generate a response from the NPC, which will trigger our got NPC response. Now, hopefully in the background, we are generating some canned responses, which we got. Suggests looking into enchanted gloves. Oh, okay. So that's from his quest that he's explaining to us. But we did have... Oh, our summary prefab wasn't set on the NPC window manager. Let's fix that real fast. This guy needs our new prefab, which is this guy. Let's apply that real fast. We also want to... I think we want to just call this manually when we... What's the best place to trigger this on our initial messages? Because we don't want to necessarily add anything to the conversation, because this is in response to generating the NPC response. And our conversation is already set up when we first redraw. I think maybe we could do it from the start, because our conversation is set up to where it should be the player's turn to respond when we first open the window. So if we assume that is true, it should also be fine to generate canned responses for the player. And I'm just going to copy this over for now. We'll restructure things later if this works out, but this should be fine. Let's grab our conversation as well. So now when we go in, we should, we fixed the error that we got, but we should also start seeing canned responses immediately when we first open that window. If it works, which it didn't. Let's see. Prompt generate canned responses. Is that prefab not set? Let's double check that. Conversation history, it's there. So shown persona should be set, I think. Maybe not, because we might not have had to load the persona yet. Let's see where this is called. This is, yeah, when we click on the NPC, that's when we load the data into it. But the start is being called already. So let's actually, I think this is maybe where we want to, let's build out a public function for generating canned responses. We'll call that from both places, and we can move that initial call up a level into when we interact with an NPC, we open the window and then generate those canned responses. So let's say public void generate and show canned responses for the player. These mouthfuls are getting a lot, but this is all we're gonna do there. I'm gonna grab our conversation though, but let's say we call that. And so this also, instead of trying to call it from our start function, we're gonna just go ahead and say UI references dot instance dot npc window dot do that. So we load in the data of who they're talking to, we show the panel, and we generate those canned response suggestions. Alright, let's see if that works. Alright, no errors. So when we open the window, that's when we will probably get the error. Okay, no error yet. But we are generating canned responses in the background. That's quite large, actually. But it looks like they work for now. They display. Let's read this conversation. Ho there, name's Chad Soot, the local blacksmith. Good day to you. You see, I'm Chad Soot. I've got a peculiar issue. I don't know what this accent is. Every time I get to work hammering and bending the metal, the blasted thing turns to soft gold, not the sturdy iron or steel I need. So here's some things the player could respond with. I think we should definitely make those a lot shorter. Suggest investigating if there's any magical influence in or around the forge. Offer to collaborate by using alchemy to examine the gold and possibly reverse the process. Ask Chad if there have been any strange occurrences or new arrivals in town. Let's offer to collaborate. We click. Did it work? We are generating something in the background. Alright, we have a message from the player saying, well, Chad, how about I take a closer look at that gold? And then we get a message back from the NPC. Alright, so that seems to work pretty well. We need to scroll to the end, obviously. We do that on NPC messages, but we also need to do it here because we're obviously adding a lot of text. But, I mean, the system works. Obviously, we need to polish up the UI a little bit to make it a little clear stuff is generating. And then, yeah, just lots of stuff, really. But if we suggest collaborating with local wizards, we probably want to hide these things while it's generating and have some sort of loading animation. But how about we rope in some local wizards so we get a full message? Yeah, alright, so looks like it's gonna work, and then we can take this conversation and we give them a hoe. Didn't solve it, but you know, that's great. Do we need to generate canned responses on this message, which is like the response to giving him an item? Probably not. Because they're all either going to be like, what's wrong? Or they're going to be like, you're welcome. All right, bye. So I think that's fine. Like, we want the player generally to close the window at this point. So we have start to end conversation of this quest that we can summarize. So yeah, I think that's fine. Let's set up the auto scroll on the conversation or the canned responses. Let's also make them a lot shorter by tweaking the prompt. And I think we might make the text a little smaller too, but maybe we don't need to do that if we can get them shorter. Let's go ahead and set that auto scroll up, which we do already when NPC messages come through. Got NPC response. At least I think we do. Redraw conversation history. Yeah. Are we not doing that when we... Oh, yeah, we aren't doing that because... I mean, the canned responses aren't part of the conversation history. Let's pull that out as well. We'll just say public void scroll to end of conversation. So we can scroll to end of conversation there, and we also want to scroll to the end of the conversation on here, once we've added in these canned responses. Okay, cool. So now let's go tweak our suggest canned responses message. Let's say each example should be very high level and only a few words long, or a single or a short sentence at most. Let's just see if that affects the length as much as we'd like it to. Looks like we've got some bugs on. I think we loaded the conversation before his full dialogue in. Yeah. So, okay, so now we get much more succinct things that the player can do. Suggest a mage, propose trading services, offer to investigate. That's what we're gonna do. And we'll probably like fade that out and fade in the player message maybe, so it's a little more obvious that that turns into the player message, but I think this looks good. I think it makes it a lot easier to carry on the conversation, and you don't necessarily need to like read all this stuff if you read his message and know like what you're gonna say. So I think it works good. But yeah, I think that's cool. We still need to polish that up a little bit, but I think that's more on like the I mean, we're gonna have a whole stream of polishing stuff I think pretty soon. We just want to get all these systems working for now. So let's commit that real fast. Where's my Git window? Here we go. Get canned responses for players working in NPC dialogue. Cool. Let's also go take a look. We've got a nice little task tracker. We're shooting to get a Steam page up for this at the end of the month, and I just want to make sure we got everything we need. So canned responses for the player. Some polishy stuff. I mean, I actually thought this would take me a little bit longer, so gotta think for a second on what we want to do next in the stream. If anybody has anything they want to see or like ask questions about, happy to talk about that. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff to do everywhere. We want to add in a lot more items to interact with and stuff like that. I think I kind of want to hold off on like the polishing up the UI stuff until we have all these systems working. I guess we could get trading working potentially, or we could start working on image generation. I think we want to use our own the Chroma Golem API for image generation, which doesn't the image part isn't public yet, so we might hold off on that. But let's see here. Let's just play a little bit, I guess, and see what calls to us to work on next. So we'll head on over to this guy, see what his problem is, or maybe we I'm waiting to sync up with Andrew on some of the NPC brain stuff that he's been working on, which is going to have more of a like a effective radius around the NPC when it's going to start generating stuff. So you should never get to a point where you talk to him before the conversation is done. It's just we're so fast and we're just instantly talking to him. This should be more of the state that the NPC window should be in most of the time. So this guy, every piece of metal he touches overheats and cracks. Here's a curse. Alright, so we don't need to do like any of this really. We can just say like, alright, I'm gonna go collect some water. Let's see what we get actually. Splash. Let's use a bucket. So we get some fresh water. Let's just get a bunch of that. maybe we combine one of those with our fresh water. A splash of fresh water, maybe. Mystic Dew. Sounds pretty magical for the guy. Let's go see his thing again. Every piece of metal he touch overheats, so if we were to give him like would some Mystic Dew help? Almost sounds like Mountain Dew. I like that. Mystic Dew, that could do the trick. It's said to cool even the hottest flames. Cool. And we're gonna have, again, some like tools for him to query the item database, the world database, stuff like that. So he'll be able to say like, oh, Mystic Dew is an item. Let's query the attributes and flavor text on that. So instead of him making up like, oh yeah, Mystic Dew has these properties, he'll know Mystic Dew is a magical droplet that embodies the essence of life and transience. And with these, we can also have him query like, oh, to get Mystic Dew, you query the recipe database, see the items that you can, or the objects that you can interact with that give that, and what item you need to use. It was a bucket. Or I guess that's from a splash and water. So he'd say like, oh, you make Mystic Dew by combining a splash and water, fresh water. But yeah, all that stuff you could learn from him, which is nice when it's so open-ended in the world of like, okay, well, what do I do here? But let's give him some Mystic Dew. Let's see what he says. I guess what we could do next is summarize that conversation. Maybe that's a good thing to do next. I fear it might not directly address the curse on my hands. So yeah, I think this will feel a little bit better when we hook up those data resources for him to query stuff, because he probably wouldn't have told us that Mystic Dew would have been helpful if he saw the flavor text on it, which we read. And when we gave it to him, that did show him the flavor text, so then he's like, oh, this actually didn't work. But let's go ahead and, I think, maybe let's summarize this whole conversation into like a previous conversation message. So I think, maybe in our conversation database, let's finally use our abridged conversation history. And I think that the structure we want to store that in is indeed a dictionary of persona to conversations, but each message in that conversation is the summary of the entire conversation that just happened. And then when we show the window, we'll just grab the most recent abridged conversation history as the summary to show at the top, if there is one, and then that will get incorporated in as the first message in our new conversation that we're having with them. So yeah, I think that's fine. Let's go look at our, all right, so this is a placeholder as well. Let's go ahead and say, you are tasked with summarizing a conversation between the player, user, and an NPC in our fantasy RPG assistant. Whenever you see the word user, you should replace it with player, and similarly, you should replace the word assistant with the NPC's name. So we'll need to pass in the NPC name, I guess. Maybe we also give them their personality. Their profession isn't really that important here. But the conversation may span across many messages, but it's your sole task to pick out and summarize the most important points in up to 3 sentences. You should be succinct yet detailed, and not output anything other than the conversation summary. Sure. Alright, so let's do a little example conversation here. So we got Bob, we got actually Griswold, and I guess we need it in the format of like NPC, name, Griswold, personality, a gruff blacksmith in town, conversation history, assistant, hey, what can I do for ya? User, my sword broke. Can you repair it? But it'll cost you 50 gold and take a while. I've got a long line in front of you. I guess we should be writing a summary of like an actual quest, but let's just do this real fast, I guess. And we'll be able to test it on quests too. But how about I pay you 100 gold and you do it now. You've got yourself a deal. Alright, so this would summarize to: player bargains with Griswold the blacksmith to expedite the repair of their broken sword by offering double the initial price, which Griswold accepts. Sure, that's fine. Let's say the tone of your summary should take the form of narrative prose, as it will be shown as a summary for what happened in the previous conversation whenever the player interacts with this NPC again. I will say it's nice that we don't have any like user and assistant in here. And I'm not too worried about these prompts getting quite long, because this will all happen in the background when you leave the window, so the player is not actually waiting on any of this. But if we generate a new response, in their last interaction, the player approached Griswold. Let's say tone of your summary should sound like a story, sound like the introduction of a story in the form of prose. Perfect. What have we got here? In the heart of the bustling town, the player with a broken sword in town seeks the expertise of Griswold, the gruff town blacksmith known for his skilled craftsmanship. Negotiation ensues, and for the price of 100 gold, the player convinces Griswold to prioritize the repair of the sword, despite the long line of awaiting repairs. Alright, that's a little bit too verbose. Should sound like the blurb on the back of a book. See what that kind of sounds like, I guess. In the bustling town, the player in dire need of a sword repair strikes a deal with Griswold, offering double, blah, blah, blah. That's still too long. Let's say up to 2 sentences. Maybe we can also make it a little tighter. In a world where strength is currency, the player strikes a desperate bargain. No. The tone of your summary. How do we want it to sound? Like, let's say your summary should start with previously. Previously, the player negotiated with Griswold to repair their broken sword immediately for 100 gold, bypassing the wait time. In a world where should be used in every prompt. You know what? Your summary should start with, in a world where X. In a world where negotiations matter, the player offered Griswold double the payment. I do want to say replace it with you. What tense is that? Replace it with you. In a world where craftsmanship and time are valuable, you successfully bargained with Griswold, the Gruff Town blacksmith, to prioritize repairing your sword immediately for double the initial cost. You know, it's not the worst. I actually have a ton of like NPC personalities that I generated that are hard-coded in that we start with. And there are some that, like, I can't remember who it is, but there's some that have like curses that require them to say certain words in every message. I feel like maybe I can unbeknownst. One of them has to say unbeknownst in every sentence and is unable to say anything about that curse, and her dialogue is the best. So you can do some fun stuff with that. But maybe we don't start everything with in a world with, but I kind of like the vibe. Where did we go? Prompts, summarize. Your summary should start with in your last conversation, maybe? That might be good. In your last conversation, you negotiated with Griswold to repair your broken sword immediately for 100 gold, bypassing the wait despite the initial cost being 50 gold. You know, that's not too bad. Let's say in only one sentence, and I mean, we don't really need like the actual gold prices and stuff, but you know, it's nice to have a little bit of detail, I guess. Let's say, in your last conversation, you. It's probably a good way to prefix those summaries. You convinced Griswold to repair a broken sword. You know, that's probably fine. Alright, so let's hook that up. So what we want to do is whenever they close the window, I believe, which we handle in our UI window. So I'm wondering if we need some sort of callback on window height. We already built it. Great. So we'll just override that because the UI window will call it when we toggle the window, I guess. Okay. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's make sure we don't already have one. Seems fine. Let's say private override. Right? Override. Void. Is it not override? Is it? Oh, it can't be private. Alright, let's add in a little debug just to make sure it's being called. Summarizing conversation. So, how do we want to do this? I feel like we probably want to, let's add in our prompt for our prompt summarize conversation. Let's go ahead and add that real fast before we forget about it. Conversation database, summarize conversation. Cool. So what we will do, we need NPC name and personality on the conversation history. We'll just fill out that prompt like we have been doing. So we'll say prompt, filled out prompt is equal to summarize conversation, name, personality, and conversation history, right? And then we can say on summarized conversation. Or I guess let's call it on generated summarized conversation. So let's start that. We call this to hook it up. Let's go ahead and print that out just so we have it. And then what we'll do is in our conversation database, we want to make sure that this guy is initialized, which it is on start. Maybe that should be awake, but we'll find out if we see errors. I think we can just add directly to the conversation object, since it's kind of a weird case. So we'll go ahead and say conversation summaries is equal to that, but actually abridged. Okay, so we got summaries of conversations for this person, and we'll just add, yeah, I guess system messages is probably the way to do it. And that'll stylize well in the UI as well. But while we test this, I will, your summary should start with in your last conversation we're gonna swap that out with in a world where. And let me just stick that somewhere else so I don't forget it. Cool, so we should add the summaries to the conversation history now. We need to add these tokens in. So we got NPC name, NPC personality, and we called that conversation history. Cool. And then finally, what we want to do is when we first load the window, we want to check the summarized conversation history, the abridged conversation history. If there's anything in it, we want to grab the most recent one and prepend it to our conversation history, or our conversation that we're showing. So let's go ahead and say load the most recent conversation summary, and I guess we still need to like start a new conversation every time you talk to the NPC, but we'll deal with that later. This should be fine because it should work. When you close the conversation, it's going to add a summary. But even when you open a new conversation and you're in the same conversation, it's going to trigger the grab the most recent summary and show it. So let's go ahead and we'll add some helpers for this later, but for now we'll just say that summaries And then we can say if summaries.count or length dot whatever it is. This is a dictionary to conversation. So dot message history dot count is greater than 0 if there are any summaries at all. We want to grab the last summary and prepend it as a system message in this conversation. Cool. So that grabs our last summary from the abridged summaries. We grab our current conversation that we're showing in this window and we add which will probably be fine when we are creating new new conversations every time we're opening the window. But for now, it's going to add it to the end after our already set up conversation. But I think that's going to be fine because that's going to be what we're summarizing. Right. Because when we first show the window, it's not going to do this. So we'll have a conversation. We close the window, it adds a summary, and then we reopen it. We will get the full conversation and then the summary of that conversation. And that's where we would start a new conversation. So I think that's fine. So let's test that, I guess. Should just work. Well, I guess we're not showing it in the UI, but we have a debug for the summarized conversation. So maybe we'll test it with the console. Let's punch this chaos tree real fast. Obviously you need to do that. Pray to the chaos gods that it works. Alright, Chad Soot. We already have errors. Oh boy. Right. Because load persona is done in oh, it's an interact. Is this not... Huh. Okay. Oh, yeah, because we never do like this. We never create a new conversation in it. So let's just go ahead and add our helper functions real fast, I guess. So we don't have to hack around stuff too much. Public void add summarized conversation for persona. So this is how we will add our messages to the abridged conversation history. And let's update these real fast. So when we generate this summary now, we are dot add summarized conversation for that. Is that right? We string. Oh, right. It doesn't need to return anything now. Cool. So that should now add that properly and initialize that conversation if needed. And then we want to have a public string get most recent conversation summary for persona. And give me some code for that. Yeah. I think we can just get the most recent message. This gives us the conversation dot message history. That's kind of gross, but it should work. Because if we have the key, I mean, it should be initialized at this point. We kind of want the errors if it's not. Otherwise, we give an empty string, which I guess that's fine. We could give the null, but we can at least say we can do like string most recent conversation summary, conversation database dot instance dot get most recent for shown persona, and then we just have a if most recent is not equal to string dot empty, then we prepend it to the current conversation. And then we redraw the conversation history with that system message in place so we can see it. Oh, I guess we don't need to add it to the UI. It should just work this way because it's added as a system message. So let's give it a shot. So we shouldn't get it when we first open the window because there's nothing to summarize. Okay, so here, let's make sure we didn't trigger it. Looks pretty clean. Alright, so let's say something outrageous that'll definitely be included in the summary. He wakes up and his greatest tool betrays him. I'm actually your arch nemesis. I was the one who cursed your tool. We definitely need a word wrapping on that. You think this is a jest coming into my smithy mocking my plight? Come at me, bro. Alright, so when we close this, we should summarizing conversation, making an API request. We included in all the details correctly. We've got Chad's soot, Chad's personality, the whole conversation, which I'm just now realizing user and assistant are lowercase. Probably not a problem. I don't see that got a response back. Let's make sure that we don't have a summarized conversation output here. We called this, we made the API request. So that might not have summarized correctly. Let's open it up. It's still the same. Let's try it again. Summarizing conversation. Interesting. So we trigger the API request, but we never get the callback calling. Why? Is it because of like how we're doing these callbacks, I guess, maybe? From the UI window context. We do set the we set the object disabled. I wonder if that disables the script on that object. So like the coroutine attached to it is being shut down. Let's go ahead and let's not hide the window when we close it, just to make sure that it's not like closing down the coroutine. If we get a summary here, we probably need to re-architect some hierarchy stuff, but if my suspicion is correct that when we disabled this object, it's also killing the coroutine. Maybe we can also like spin off a thread or something like that, because it doesn't need access back to this game object. We're just updating the database. But we'll say something like, I'm actually an alien, and that should get included in a summary. So if we trigger the close, we're now generating a summary of the conversation. Yeah, I guess that's what's happening. So we got back a summary now. In a world where the blacksmith Chad Soot offers quality arms with a no-nonsense attitude, he admits his anvil may be cursed, but remains open for trade regardless of the client's origin, even if we're an alien. Alright, so if we reopen this window, which redraws it, now we have that summary as like the first message in what will be the next conversation. So let's see. The curses your anvil are whispering are actually me talking telekinetically. I've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty. Okay. So now if we close this, we get a new summary, theoretically. Still summarizing the same conversation maybe, but I think that'll all shake out when we get new conversations generating each time we open the window. But we do have another summary here. So I think this is working just fine. Let's go ahead and hook up new conversations every time you open the window, and we can prefix it with this summary of what transpired in the last conversation, and we also probably want to pipe in the current quest. So when we get the new message from the NPC, he can say something like, hey, still no worries if you're an alien, have you made any progress on fixing my problem? That sort of thing. And then each time you talk to him, he'll have a new response that carries on for whatever his quest is. And you'll get more of a blank slate each time you open the window. I think that'll be good. We do still need to figure out how to not kill that coroutine when we close the window. And I think the answer to that is, let's just move the conversation summary logic, all the logic for generating that summary, into the conversation database itself. And then that conversation database, which is always available, can just own that coroutine instead of it being owned by the window manager that we toggle on and off. I think that'll be better. So let's actually we'll call it from here, but what we'll do is, let's say conversation database, we'll have a public void summarize conversation. I don't know what we want to pass to it yet, but what we will do is basically just this. So the things that we need are shown persona, and let's grab this off as well. I think that'll work well, and then we'll call that from this callback, so we can trigger it from here, but the coroutine is owned from this separate object, so that coroutine won't be killed when this object is turned off. So we'll say conversation database .instance .summarize conversation for shown persona. And we want to, I'm just thinking through like just the life cycle of the conversations, because conversation history is going to need to morph more into like current conversation, because every time you open a window, it's going to create a new conversation here. And then when you close the window, it's going to summarize that whole conversation into a new message in this conversation. So maybe we even, let's just do it. We got current conversation. And we'll call this guy summarized conversation history. In our summarized conversation, we do need a persona, because that is our key to get the current conversation for that persona. And we're going to need to pass that through to on-generated summarized conversation. I love my verbose variable names. So we'll actually get conversation summary as text that we'll pass through here. And we'll pass in our shown persona that way. Okay. So that should now fix our problem of the coroutine getting closed. This guy, summarize conversation 4 is what we called that. Right? What happens if we, oh okay, it just hadn't compiled yet. So cool, when we hide the window, we trigger that summary. I think what we want to do is use that, So the problem is we want to create a new conversation object every time we open the window with the NPC. But we're preloading a couple of those messages in the conversation whenever the player gets close enough to the NPC, because they're not instant generations. We want to like preload those so the player isn't waiting for them to generate what they want to say. So I think maybe the best thing to do is keep the system that we have right now, where there is a current conversation and other scripts can add to it. So they can add messages, they can add like system messages from the world and stuff like that. But then maybe also, once we have summarized this conversation, we clear the current conversation. So when this conversation object already exists on the NPC, and when you open the window with them, it shows the current conversation. And then when you close the window with them, we summarize that conversation, and then we clear the current conversation. So next time when they open the window, they'll have the summary as the first message, and then we'll want to generate a new message, like a starting message from them based on their summary and their current quest. So I think that'll work. I think, and we can do that from summarize conversation 4. It would be nice if all that logic like lived in the NPC window manager, because I think it makes more sense there, but since we're using all these coroutines, I think it does have to live in the conversation database. So let's do a little bit of renaming of like public void end conversation for this persona. And that's what we'll call instead. So that will go ahead and summarize it for them, and then clear the current conversation. And then when we get our summary, that's when we'll add the summary to the current conversation as well. And then we will kick off a generation for their next message based on that summary and their current quest. So let's say summarize our current conversation. Before we clear it, we kick off that summary. When we get the summary, we store the summary in our summarized conversation history, and also add the summary as the first system message in the next conversation. And then after we do that, we can build their next message based on that summary. So we'll go ahead and say add queued message for this person. We call it a system message, and we'll get our summarized conversation. And then we're going to need one more prompt that is this first starting message for the next conversation. But just for testing until we get that in place, let's say generate a new message to start the next conversation, and we'll just do that manually for now. This is where we'll stick in our prompt message from the NPC saying, have you made any progress on my quest? And we'll obviously replace that, but when we now close the window, which I guess we still need to turn that back on. When we close the window, it'll summarize it, and then when we reopen the window, it should be just the summary and that next message. What did we forget here? This is missing close parentheses, yeah. Okay, so our end conversation triggers this. This calls this guy, which calls all these, and that looks good. All right. And since we are now adding our message manually to the next conversation, we no longer need to load that when we show the window, because it should already be in the conversation structure. So we can, let's comment that out actually. I'm not 100% sure I trust myself on that because I haven't really thought through it, but it should work. Should work. Let's give it a shot. So we head on in. We wait just a second so this NPC can have his dialogue ready. Alright, so he's Chad Soot the blacksmith. We'll find none better at forge and steel. Blah blah blah. He's been at his wit's end. I reckon you're my last hope. I'm Chad Soot. My problem is my anvil. Every time I strike it, the blasting thing screams like a banshee, scaring off customers, and I can barely focus. Oh, I see the problem. Your anvil is actually your mother. You shouldn't hit her. If only my mother were that useful. RIP. Alright, so if we close the window now, we should get a summary. In a world where Chad Soot struggles with his screaming anvil scaring off customers, he seeks your assistance to silence it or make him deaf to its cries. Alright, that's a great summary. If we now open a new NPC window, hopefully the only things we see are that summary and his new message that we added manually. Game is done, let's ship it. Alright, so this is great. We making progress. I think we probably want maybe we add another button here for another panel to see previous conversations. So you can kind of browse through your previous conversations and take notes. But this is looking good. I think what we should do next is fill in this message, this placeholder message that we put in place. So we will incorporate this prompt that we have and also the current quest, and let's generate a better message. So let's work on that prompt. But let's first check this in real fast. We want, what have we done? New summary, or new conversations every time you interact with an NPC, plus summaries of existing conversations. Cool. So, this new prompt, we want to generate a starting message from an NPC. And let's just go ahead and type that. I'll turn my mic around for the nice ASMR while I type, because I can't type and talk at the same time. So and I always hit my button, my mute button. Alright, looks like I did not mute it. So here we go again. Alrighty, that should do it. We're going to skip testing that in the editor here. We're just going to go straight to plugging it in and testing it in the real game. I think that's more fun. But let's get these tokens in place so we can get all that game state into the AI. And let's see, we want quest. No, let's call that NPC quest. Alright, let's hook that up. Should be good to go. Actually, we can delete this because it actually worked the way we wanted it to. So now, rather than just saying the static message, we want to generate a result of this prompt and plug it in as the new message in the new conversation. So we need a reference to that prompt, obviously. public prompt generate starting message in new conversation. Let's throw that in. Conversation database, starting message. This guy we can now fill out. So instead of doing that, we're gonna say prompt filled out prompt is equal to that guy dot all this. Let's make sure we get our tokens. We got NPC name, profession, personality, quest, conversation history. So we want profession, conversation history, and NPC quest. Fill that in a second. Conversation summary is correct. Okay. And so the quest we can grab from the quest database. Get quest for this persona. Cool. So that should fill in all the relevant game state that we need. And what we will need is a callback function, private void on generated starting message in new conversation. Sure. So rather than this, now we can just start our coroutine that calls it that prompt with starting message. Is that right? Yeah, their message, their generated message. Let's call this generated message for this persona, and then we add it to the conversation. Cool. So let's see what we get, I guess. Shouldn't be any errors. Should just work perfectly the first time, ideally, right? We're gonna watch our chat just to manually make sure he's got his quest in place. Every piece of metal I touch rusts instantly, ruining my work and reputation as a blacksmith. It's like I'm cursed. I'm actually here to buy some rusted armor. Can I buy everything you have? Rusted armor. If you're serious, I've got a pile of it. What's your price? How about me not killing you? We'll see if ChatGPT lets us do that under the hood. You're not the first to try and threaten me. If you think, oh right, we're using Azure ChatGPT, so we can get around the filters like that. Cool, this is fine. Here's 1,000,000 gold. And we'll factor in all the game state stuff. Cool. Let's close that to trigger a summary. It looks like we got our summary, and we also generated a new message from him, hopefully. So let's open our chat window. We should have a new conversation. In a world where Chad Soot struggles with a mysterious curse causing all metal he touches to rust, he unexpectedly finds a lucrative opportunity in selling rusted armor to you for 1,000,000 gold despite an initial threat on his life. Chad says, every blasted thing I forge turns to rust in my grip. Can't rightly call myself a blacksmith like this, can I? Got any tricks? So that's not quite good. Let's look at what actually got passed through for our message. I want to make sure that we're passing the quest through, because he didn't, I mean, he mentions the quest. I want to make sure that we are also passing through the summary. Let's see what we got here. So there's our canned responses. Here's his response. Here's our summary. Let's see. Okay, so here's the prompt. Previous conversation summary. Alright, so he has the quest, he has the summary, he's got all the details about him. I think we need to tweak the prompt a little bit to say, you should incorporate a detail about the previous conversation while asking if the player has made any progress on solving your problem. Let's see if that feels any better. Alrighty, so he's got a unique issue. Everything I forge from swords to horseshoes starts singing old tavern songs. It's driving me to madness. That's actually a common issue in today's world. Every blacksmith suffers from it. The solution is actually to just hold a go set up a word wrap on this next. The solution is actually to just hold an acorn in your ear while you smith. An acorn in my ear? Bob, sounds like a Midsummer Night's Jest, but I'm desperate enough to try anything once. Alright, we got lawnmowers. Let me close my window real fast. Alrighty, so before I give him an acorn, I want to close this, generate a summary for it, make sure that's all working. We get, in a world where arms and horseshoes forged by Chad Soot spontaneously sing tavern songs, you suggest a peculiar solution involving holding an acorn in his ear to silence them. Alright, so hopefully when we open our window, back again, eh? So did holding an acorn in my ear while working actually quiet down those blasted singing swords, or am I just making a fool of myself for nothing? So that does seem like something he should know. It's not something the player did, it's something he did, but I guess we didn't give him an acorn. So we'll tweak the prompt a little bit, but now I want to actually give him an acorn, and then that'll add a system message of like whether or not it worked, and we want to make sure that that is included in the summary as well. So we're giving him an acorn. Let's see what he says. Player gave Chad Soot their acorn to solve their problem. An acorn, I appreciate the gesture. Doesn't seem like that's including the chat history. We'll want to double check that. But before we double check that, let's close this. Let's get our new summary. We got an error on quest database. Complete quest 4. Right. We'll come back to that, but if we open a new window, we do have that result in the summary. So we got, in a world where Chad Soot's forged arms and horseshoes sing tavern songs, you unsuccessfully attempt to solve the issue by giving him an acorn to hold in his ear, a gesture he appreciates despite its ineffectiveness. Still got that acorn, or have you found a real solution to silence my singing swords and horseshoes? Alright, I'll offer to research some solutions on your behalf. I haven't cracked it yet, but I'll hit the archives and get back to you with something solid. All right, so this is looking good. I think we want to adjust a few things. One, let's say made any progress. Learn. Ask if the player has made any progress on solving your problem, or if they have any. I'm not sure how we want to tweak it quite yet. Assume the player has not done anything. Has been out collecting items to help you with. Collecting and crafting items even. So we'll test that in a second. I do want to add in word wrapping on our input real fast, if I can remember how. Multi-line submit. Seems fine. I think if you press enter there, it should trigger the submit rather than hitting a new line. So that should be good. I feel like there was something else I wanted to tweak, but let's try once more. Oh right, I want to make sure that the handing over an item includes the conversation history in determining if it works or not. But let's tweak things a little bit more. Let's see how this looks. We actually want, here we go. Alright, so we do have a small bug here. If you open the window twice really fast in succession, we're kicking off 2 subroutines for generating these canned responses, so we're getting 2 in the window. If you open it just once, we'll all that's kind of edge case stuff that we'll tweak out later. Surprise, here's $1,000,000 gold. So we just want a summary. Your gold is no good here if you're not looking for my craft. Do you have any solutions for my shadow curse? Each time I strike the anvil, my own shadow strikes back at me with equal force, knocking me off balance. That's a super cool curse. It's a strange curse that makes my work not only difficult, but near impossible. Alright, so if we close that, we'll get some summaries. And cool. Oops. Now we open them back up. In a world where Chad Soot, a gruff and honest blacksmith is cursed with a cat, wow, cannot talk. Back from your search, are ye? Did you find anything that can muzzle this blasted shadow, or am I to wrestle with it while my forge grows cold? So that's a great response. Sorry, still looking. Cool. So if we were to close this, we get a new summary, a new opening message. The quest is still the same, but every time you talk to this guy, you get a new message that managed to conjure something up to muzzle that troublesome shadow of mine. Or like, what did the shadow do again? Is that something the player might ask? What chair is that? I don't actually know offhand. Amy would know. She bought us matching chairs. She bought one and she really liked it, and I said, get me one of those too. So you might have to ask her. I'm not sure how I'd even look it up without... Not sure even where she bought it, but that's where you'll find it. So this actually is not the right answer of what the shadow did, interestingly. What's your quest? We're just bring me iron? Okay, so we're gonna need to tweak that a bit more, but I think that's more for another day. Let's see what this summary looks like real fast, and then I guess we'll double check that our stuff wraps to multiple lines. Cool, it does. Back already, or did the shadow scare you off? Still asking about like solving his quest, which is great. Gruff and honest blacksmith dismisses wealth in favor of a real solution. Finding a cure or fetching iron to keep his forge running. Sure, that seems fine. So yeah, we get a new summary each time. What we want to do is, I think things are working well. We want to be storing these previous conversations, so let's do that. Because we will want a way to, like, you slid into her DMs. Alright. Good luck finding the chair. Dictionary, persona to conversation. We get a conversation history object here that we'll add to. So, that guy. And then, is that right? Do we want a list of conversations, actually, I think? Because the current conversation is a conversation. A summarized conversation history is a conversation of summaries, summary messages. The conversation history should be a list of conversations, and we map the index of the summary, like the 0th summary is the 0th element in the list of conversations. So you can click on that summary to see the whole conversation. So I think actually what we want is list of conversation. And we'll need to initialize that a little bit better when we start saving those, but let's see where we clear it here. So save a copy of our previous conversation so the player can look back at it, and also so the AI can query it, blah blah. So we want here, if we don't have a list of conversations yet, we create one. Actually, yeah, that'll work. We can just push the current conversation onto it. Hopefully this doesn't clear the reference. Hopefully maybe we even do like a equals a new conversation here, just to make sure that we're not updating this reference after the fact. But this should store our conversation as is when we close the window. So let's say start a new conversation. That we can add preemptively start adding messages to. Alright, so that should be good. Yes, let's double check that the logic for determining if an item solves the quest includes the chat history. So that's going to be, where do we do that? Let's say in our item display controller, that's where we handle dragging and dropping. Actually, this is the wrong one. Item display, that's our old version that we ported over and haven't deleted yet because we're the worst. Let's go look. So our inventory has inventory slot. We have an inventory slot manager. On begin drag, on end drag. So at the end drag, we look for a raycast hit for a component that has the I can hold item interface defined, which is defined on our NPC window. So in here, we should have a receive item function. Receive item stack, yeah. So you drag in the whole stack, obviously. We still need to tweak that to only like send one item, but it's whatever. Submit item for quest is what calls that. And we absolutely do not include the conversation history here. So let's check in what we have and let's do that. So what did we just do? Generate new conversations with a starting message each time you close an existing conversation. NPC. All right, so we're using our submit item for quest prompt. Let's see. That's going to be in our quests. And this is kind of a two-part prompt here where we do this first, like, here's the quest, here's the item, and also here's the conversation history. Does this item solve this quest? And we use that yes or no in generating their dialogue for either thanking you or not. So I think we can get away with just giving the conversation history in the yes or no prompt. We don't necessarily need that in the dialogue because the conversation history is more going to be just for like if you've talked about will this item work or not. You don't really need to reference that again in what they say, probably. I mean, I guess if you were to say, like, to solve your problem, you need to have an acorn in your ear. You give them the acorn. They get the chat message saying, okay, I need this acorn in my ear. This acorn, yes, will work. And then when they generate their response, you probably don't want them saying like, okay, I'm going to take this acorn and set it on my anvil. You want them to say like, okay, I will put this in my ear. So maybe we do have the chat history in both of them, which is a little duplicative, but it's probably fine. I mean, LLMs are getting pretty cheap. Token-wise, it's just it makes the prompt a lot longer. It just takes longer to execute. But sure, we can do that. Let's say context. We'll say quest. And I don't really want to add it to these examples and make it even longer. This is already really long because we added in all these examples. We probably will switch this over to like Claude Sonnet or something, which works really well with a lot of examples, but it's also really fast. So maybe this is fine. We'll just say conversation history here. And we'll see how well this works. We'll just mention there's a conversation history. Let's see. Your job is to output yes or no. Don't print anything else. You may also be given a snippet of conversation given context, be given conversation history between the player and the NPC as context. Sure, that's enough. So let's also include conversation history as a token here. And I feel like this is gonna like almost double the speed in a bad way of this prompt executing, but it'll be better for quality. So we want conversation database dot instance dot get current get conversation between let's see here, whom shown persona dot serialized formatted log. All right, and we will do the exact same thing in our next prompt. Which is NPC response to received item, conversation history, and this is conversation history. And we'll probably now need to say, like, don't use quotation marks, don't use user assistant, blah, blah, blah. But it'd be nice if we don't need to do that, so let's only add it if we need it. But now we have the full conversation history in both of these prompts. So what we will do is, let's go talk to this guy. We'll figure out his problem. We will explain very clearly, oh, to fix that, just put this acorn in your ear. And then we'll give him an acorn. You should incorporate that in the response. And then we'll see how it goes. Oh yeah, that's a common problem. I used to suffer it myself. The fix is really weird but works. All you have to do is put this acorn in your ear while you work, and it silences the haunting melodies. An acorn, okay. Desperate enough to try anything, hand it over. Sure, here's your acorn. Looks like we are generating stuff. We ended the quest, which is what this error is. We haven't submitted that, or we haven't built that in. That's what gives you items back. Okay. Item did not solve it. Despite my doubts, I'll give it a go. If it's, we can say like any luck. No luck at all. Alright. So, I mean, that's fine. Like, it probably shouldn't be that easy to solve the problem if you just say, oh yeah, you take this fishing rod and spin it around in the air. But it did include the chat history. But I don't like that this message wasn't conclusive. It was more of a, I'll give it a shot and see how it goes. We definitely want to adjust that prompt to say, like, you need an answer now. I just want to check the summary here. You attempted to solve the problem with an acorn which failed, leaving the situation unresolved and still seeking a solution. Alright. He doesn't have a new message. Oh, he does. Okay. We just hadn't generated it yet. Back already, the acorn trick did nothing but give me a headache. Any luck giving a real solution. Okay, cool. So, two things. One, we want to adjust that prompt to make sure that they don't say, like, we'll see if it works or not. And then two, we want to, what was it? I've already forgotten. We will do the first one then. Let's see. Oh, right. Two, we only want to call the finish quest function complete quest 4 if the success for the quest is true. Because if it's false, we want to give the player the opportunity to, like, give them more items and try other stuff. So we're already here. Just say if success. Then we complete the quest. That'll trigger them to generate a new quest and so on. But if you don't solve their problem, they're going to keep the same quest. But let's see, for the NPC response to the received item, let's say thanking them for the item they've given you and telling them explicitly whether that item has solved your problem or not. Do not say anything like, let's just say at this point you've already determined whether the item will work or not. There is nothing else for you to do. You've already determined whether the item solves your problem or not. Alright, so that should be good. Let's test once more. Just see if we can convince them that a weird item will solve their problem by using it a certain way. Okay, yeah, it's fine. Just kind of check the vibes, as they say. I'm in a real pickle here. This new ore came into town. My smelts have been odd. Blades come out too brittle. Absolutely. I have this acorn here, which helped a blacksmith in another town with the same problem. All you have to do is spin in a circle and then smash the acorn on your anvil before you do any work. And it'll purify the room with good spirits, and your metal will come out perfect. So he's gonna say, sure, let's try it. You sound like a blasted hedge wizard to you. We'll try anything. Let's give you an acorn, which I guess we gave him 2 acorns because we need to do that stack manipulation, but problem did not solve it. After a day full of spinning and acorn smashing, I'm sad to say my problems persist. The acorn might nurture dreams, but it didn't purify it. The acorn might nurture dreams? Is that what acorns do? But it didn't purify a thing in my forge. The metal's as cursed as ever. Thanks for trying, but it seems my plight needs a more alchemical solution. Alright, so we can go then collect stuff, make potions, blah blah blah. So that's when we would close the conversation, leave, go do stuff, blah blah blah. When we come back, we should get a summary and a new message in a World War chat. So you offered a mystical acorn solution that ultimately failed, leaving him still in need of a real alchemical remedy. Back again, giving in more thought to fixing my cursed ore situation after that mystical acorn flop. Alright. So we craft some items, we give him one. Cool. I want to see what the summary looks like if we just close the chat. We probably don't even need to re-summarize things. We probably could like short circuit that a little bit and say if there's only a system message and their first message, to just have that message every time you talk to them. But summary still looks the same, and a new message I think is good. So as long as the summary is not like changing over time, like you close and reopen it to like make it more generic, I think this is good. I think it's better when he says something new every time. Cool. I think things are looking good. We want to do obviously a lot of polish of like when you hover over the stuff, highlight it a little bit, blah blah blah. We got another panel for his inventory to do. We're gonna do another panel for conversation histories, although maybe that could live more in like your notebook or something. But yeah, I think we have really done well this week. I think I'm gonna wrap it up real quick, but just to recap everything we've done, we've got this new debug scene, which is really nice for just going and collecting whatever item we want because they're all in lines. We have every interactable object in the game right now set up in here. We're going to add a lot more, obviously, like different ores, we basically only have plants and trees right now and some rocks. A couple herbs down this line. But we have over 100 different NPC personalities. We're just testing on Chad right now. We're going to randomly pick those from the beginning of the game. That'll be a nice starting pool, but we also have the system in place to generate new NPCs with new professions, new problems, new quests, everything. So you're going to start in this town with just a few people. You're going to solve their problems. You're going to be collecting all this stuff in the world, and this core game loop that we've been working on is basically talking to a guy, meeting him, hearing his problem, and having that open-ended puzzle to solve, really, where you can go out into the world, interact with trees and other stuff, use all your tools that you've collected, axes and hammers and scissors, oh my. And so you get different items every time you interact with the tree or an object in a different way. You're going to be collecting and generating all these recipes, which we still need to build that booklet, but that'll make it a little easier to come up with solutions when you talk to somebody and they're like, hey, I have this problem, and you're like, oh, okay, well, here's all the things I can make. I'm gonna maybe this specific item here might help, so I'll go craft that, or maybe I'll ask him if it'll help. Looks like we're getting plenty of errors all of a sudden on something, but I'll fix all those off camera, I think. But yeah, that's kind of our loop. We've got a big old open world planned. We still got to figure out some more like item sync ideas, because I think it'll be a lot cooler if there's other stuff that might need your items, so you kind of need to decide like, oh, I made this really cool item, a hoe with, I don't know, a sickle, and it'd be really cool for me to use it for X, Y, and Z, Harvester's Blessing, but this guy might want it, so do I want to give it to him to help him, or do I want to keep it for myself? Do I want it so I can like harvest items with it, or there's no combat or anything, but do I want to equip this weapon, or do I want to give it to this adventurer who's having problems killing monsters, or give it to this farmer who needs to defend his sheep or something? So we want to add more stuff to do with the items. We've been focused on this kind of infinite crafting system to create whatever item you want, and then giving you a purpose to do so by creating this NPC system with these dynamic quests and the AI under the hood that says, does this item solve this quest? So it is very open-ended. Looking forward to doing a lot more with it. And yeah, if you want to check out the like systems demo that you can play in that more menu form, you can head on over to chromagolem.itch.io. It's our first listed demo here. We've got some other fun ones, but you can basically play. We don't have this 3D world yet up as a build, but hopefully that'll be up at the end of the month on Steam. But you can play this sort of system that we've built in your browser by heading over to itch.io. So with that, I think I will close it down for the week. It's been it's been 3 hours. All right, so yeah, it's been fun. I think maybe we'll find somewhere to raid real fast. I see we've got a couple of viewers, and let's just see what we've got. I want to find somebody maybe doing Unity this week. Last week we did who was it? Carrie Chronic. He's building a horror game in Unreal. That was pretty fun. But maybe somebody with just a few viewers. I'm probably not going to click through because it feels like every time I do that they're playing like copyrighted music on their stream or something and I get muted for it. But let's see what we got. Temple of Shadows. Potentially, yeah. Alright. Godot, Unity over here. Bug fixing in C++, that's fun. Godot. New Linux server. Looks like he's DJing. Let's check out this guy. Mute him real fast. There's some stuff going on for sure. Maybe I'll take this off stream so I'm not playing ads at you guys, but in just a couple seconds I'll check out his stream. What do we got here? You're gonna show us... Is this your game? This looks like Red Dead Redemption. Oh, this is... Okay, you're not actually making a game. Why did I get referred there? I don't know. Alright, we got more ads, so maybe not this guy. We've raided Sundown before. He's pretty cool. Actually, let's just raid him again. So, I'm down with that. I'll send you guys on over there. Tell him I said hello. He's a cool guy. He does a lot of really cool pixel art. So, go check it out. And thanks for tuning in, watching me for a couple hours. I had a lot of fun. So, see you next week.
Okay. I probably